everyone. I am Melissa Forziat. I'm a keynote speaker and the host of this Halt and Catch Fire rewatch podcast. Now, when I speak, my topic is something that I call Take the Doughnut, which for me is another way to say carpe diem, go after the things that you want in life. Something I wanted to do this year was rewatch the show Halt and Catch Fire, but this time talk about it with other humans, which has been such a blast. So this started out with episode recaps of each episode, and then I began doing interviews with cast and crew. And now I'm doing some special bonus interviews with people who are in some way affiliated with the world of Halt and Catch Fire. And hopefully it just adds some new context to the show. Maybe if this is the first time you're hearing about the show, it encourages you to watch it. And I'm so excited to bring in today's guests, who are going to be Emily Gipson and Jennifer Morgan, who organize the ATX Festival. Emily is the co-founder and co-president. Jennifer is the director of programming. And I'm specifically interested to talk with them today because the ATX Festival this year in 2024 did a 10-year reunion for Halt and Catch Fire. So they worked really hard to bring the band back together. And I'm so excited to talk with Emily and Jennifer. Welcome.
Hi.
So glad to have you both here and to get your thoughts on this show. For those who are brand new to Halt and Catch Fire, we're going to try to keep this as spoiler free as we can. Look, it's not easy with this show, but we're going to try and hopefully tease you into it. And for those who know the show, hopefully we'll give you some new information. But first, let me ask you this to both of you. Really, every question here is to both of you, whoever wants to take them. Tell me about your journey with the show Halt and Catch Fire. I mean, did you both find it when it was originally airing? Did you come to it later? Tell us a bit about your journey.
So I kind of came in the middle, honestly. I feel like I had heard about it during season one. It actually premiered at South by Southwest in Austin. So like it just had kind of, heard about it through other festival things when it was first premiering, and then missed season one for whatever reason. Season two really like kicked off. And I feel like a lot of the critics that I was following as like a huge TV nerd were really starting to like talk about it and be like, hey, this is like something you should be watching like week to week. And so I can't remember if I came in before season two finished or right after. But definitely before season three, kind of caught myself up, and then ended up watching season 3 and 4 week to week as it was airing. And just had like the best, like, I'm so glad that I caught it before, like during that original run, and kind of got to have those last 2 seasons.
What do you think for you when you say you're glad you caught it during the original run? What do you think you got from that experience that you wouldn't have gotten if you had just binged it all after the fact?
That's a good question. I mean, I think like so much of the fun of like watching TV for me and being part of the festival, like, is having that sort of community experience and being able to discuss the shows that are really exciting to us. And so we had another person in on our team at that time who was really into the show. And so we would come into the office, the day after and like have these hour-long discussions, about like the episode the night before. And it was just like, it's starting to kind of find that, that critical community and online community, and seeing people be really excited about it, getting to read, recaps and breakdowns from my favorite critics and stuff was just like really added like another element to the show, and which is already like such a rich text, but being able to sort of have all those other pieces and really like also see people outside of myself being so invested in it was a lot of fun.
Emily, what about you? What was your journey with this show?
I heard Jen talk about it for years. And for whatever reason, I am a very particular TV viewer. I don't know how to describe it, but it takes me a while to watch things, and I watch things very slowly. So like when I invest in something, sometimes it takes me a while to get there, but I heard Jen talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. It was very supportive of how much she loved it. And I was like, I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there. And I think started watching a few years ago after the show had ended, because definitely heard all of the critical acclaim and knew that there were people that deeply loved it, but for whatever reason, just hadn't watched. And then a few years ago, I started watching, and I think, sometimes we just have times in our lives where just things don't click in the right way. And as we were starting to gear up for the reunion, I was like, okay, Jen, I'm in. We're going to do it. I'm here for it. And it was really what sold me on it, because as much as we try to watch everything that comes to the festival, we can't always watch all of it. But even more than just wanting to watch a few episodes, Jen really sold me. One, just her deep love of it. And Jen watches a lot of television, as is her job. So when she like deeply, deeply loves something, you do want to pay attention and give it that time and give it that attention. But it was the relationship between Cam and Donna, and the fact that I am in a business partnership with a woman that we have been in for over a decade, with the ups and downs and ins and out, and being in a business partnership with someone who is also a dear friend and someone you love deeply. I was very interested in that journey for the two of them, and starting to watch it, really liked season 1, especially when last summer, when I really was like, okay, we're in, I'm going to start doing this. I really loved season 1, but season 2, I hope this isn't too spoilery, but season 2, once the partnership really starts between Cam and Donna, that's when I was like, oh, I get this show, and these are the two people I care about and their relationship more than anyone else. And then I was here for the rest of it, all the ups and downs and ins and outs.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And it's also a perfect segue, because I feel like this is a good time to give a little bit more background on this show itself. So Halt and Catch Fire aired from 2014 to 2017 in its original airing. It tells the story of a team of main characters. I'm going to say 5 main characters, and Cameron and Donna are 2 women who are 2 of the main characters. They all have different technical skill sets that they bring to the team, as it were. They're at the forefront of major tech advancements, usually somewhere related to computers, from 1983 to 1994. So there's a huge nostalgia element to this show. And some of the different elements that we'll see in terms of the tech advancements and the ideas and the visions that we're coming up with are things like personal computers, community game and chat forums, antivirus software, the World Wide Web itself. The stuff that we saw during that time is the stuff that they're tackling in this show. So that's a bit of the like sort of overarching. I'll get into some of the characters a bit later, but Emily, you shared a little bit about what drew you to this show in terms of like what your entry point was in the story. Jennifer, was there something similar for you? Was there like a part of this show? Obviously, you had heard great critical acclaim, but what element kept you hooked?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I just immediately fell in love with Cam and Donna as separate people. Like even in season 1, I love season 1. I will like go to the mat for season 1. I don't think I would politely discuss any of the the people who are kind of like, well, you got to give it till season 2. I think it's amazing in season 1, and so I think by the time you get even 2 or 3 episodes in, and you kind of really understand like the types of people that those 2 women are and how they can work together and how they can clash so easily. I mean, I think that dynamic just immediately had me hooked. And then knowing sort of where I came into the show, that was going to be a bigger part of it going into season 2, was just like, I was in on them very easily.
I think it's worth putting a finer point on that, because there are 4 seasons of this show, and depending on who you are, some people with really deep technical knowledge, season 1 is their favorite season. A number of people will say season 1 is not their favorite season. For me, I think it's 40 perfect episodes of television. I think they're all good. They're all, but one thing I want to highlight here is that because I've been doing episode recaps, and there are people who have been commenting, and I'm talking like novels. So if you want to if you want to get some really good deep dives, go to the YouTube channel recapping everything at Take the Doughnut, because it's what I'm finding is that as you go through each season, it becomes cumulative, and the stuff that you learned in season 1 is actually critical and often referenced and often echoed in the later seasons. So not like people who say skip season 1, I think you'd really miss a lot.
Yeah.
Like you'd miss all the foundation.
And I think, because I think the fact that I pretty much watched season 1 twice, and I think I had to, in my second watch of it, had to go in letting go of not understanding a lot of the technical aspects, but they do a great job of, at least you understand what they're trying to do. And you're not going to figure out, like, I don't know how to code. I'm not going to know how to make a computer chip, but at least I understand that's what they're doing. And once I just let the rest of it go and understood what they were doing and the stakes of it, I was like, oh, you can just enjoy this for the characters, because I mean, that's what we can all get behind, is like any great TV show. It comes down to the characters and the relationships. It doesn't matter what they're doing.
Absolutely. So knowing your role, ATX TV Festival, you're highlighting all this different television programming, past, present, maybe future, in your each season that you're hosting your event. I'm sure in any given year, there are so many shows having an anniversary. What made it the right choice to feature a reunion panel for Halt and Catch Fire in season 13?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have just lists upon lists of like shows that we love and what those anniversaries are, and I think there is something very cool about being able to give a show like a little bit of room to breathe, after it ends, and like find sort of that right timing to revisit it. And I mean, honestly, like we had made the pitch to get Halt here many times, many years ago when it was actually airing, and it just never worked out for whatever reason. And so once it ended, it was kind of like, okay, well, let's give it a few years, and then hopefully everybody still feels, fondly about it, wants to get back together. And so, as soon as we kind of came up on this round anniversary, and we're like, it feels like the right time. Let's see if, let's reach out to Chris and see if they're interested. And then immediately started getting back like, yes. And then they put us in touch with Melissa, and she was immediately like, yes. And then Mark said yes. And then everybody started saying yes. And I think that's so many times with like reunions, that's how you know that it's the right time, is like you start getting those yeses, you sort of feel out from the group, like, okay, they're ready to revisit it, and then figure out like what shape that sort of takes.
Yeah, so this was always on your list. It was just a matter of when, it sounds like.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Over the years of your festival, you've assembled casts and crew from a variety of TV shows. So now that this event is done, what is something you'll specifically remember about bringing Halt and Catch Fire folks together?
Man. I will say
You go if you're ready.
well, I will say there's kind of two things, but one of them that sticks out for me is that a lot of times we are running around during the actual event, and we don't really get to sit and watch a lot of things, and definitely don't get to watch them in their entirety, like as they're happening, and we'll kind of, interact with the group in other ways and places and sort of catch them as we can. But like this was one, like a rare instance where I think the majority of our team found a way to carve out time to physically be in the room for the majority of this. And so like we all got to kind of sit in the back of the room together, and like really, like by the time we had got to the festival, I feel like almost all of us had watched it, and some of our like supporting staff had watched it. And And so everyone was really like caught up and invested and ready for this reunion. And so like getting to sit at the back of the room together and just kind of like be present for that moment was like kind of the ideal experience for something like this. So yeah, that's what I will sort of take away from it.
And I would say watching the cast and creatives. So Jen pulled a lot of clips and worked with the two Chris's, the two creators, on which clips to show throughout the panel. And it really worked on that, wanting to highlight all 4 seasons, especially the actors that were there and the different conversations that wanted to be had, and watching each of them watch and react to the clips, and you could see their memories come back of filming, and just you can tell when a show truly deeply means something to the people that created it, both in front of and behind the camera. Like you see that on stage and you see that in their reactions, and like you knew the show meant so much to them, and it was so apparent in the way that they got choked up at various times and remembering filming specific scenes and how that worked. I do want Jen to talk about the one clip. You don't have to give spoilers, but there was a clip that Jen really wanted to show, and I think the two Chris's were like, sure, fine, maybe, whatever, but then you pushed for it, and then someone really appreciated that you showed it.
Yeah, so my favorite scene of the entire series is basically a clip where Donna is on oh my gosh.
Shrooms. Is that the one you're thinking
Yes,
of?
yes.
Yep.
But Diane. Yes, Donna is on shrooms at Diane's house. And she's just kind of walking the property, and then she ends up in the grass kind of having this hallucination, dream, something in between. And Peter Gabriel's Mercy Street is playing, and it's just like the most, like, I think the first time I watched this scene, I must have rewound it 10 times and was just like, couldn't even get through the rest of the episode because I was like, what just happened? Like it just is like burned in my brain. And so this is like my favorite, scene of the entire series. And as I'm kind of talking to the Chris's and Melissa Bernstein and our moderator, Catherine Van Arendonk, and kind of like compiling all these clips and figuring out like, okay, what are we going to have to cut? What do we want to prioritize? And had put together this list, and Melissa had, I think, shared it with the cast and came back and said, Carrie, really, I was like, this is not a clip that was on the Chris's list, but this is one that I would like to suggest. And Melissa came back and basically said, like, Carrie would really like to include this one. And so when we got to that in the panel, it was like this perfect scene played. And then Carrie Bichet told the most beautiful story about this camera assistant who helped them like execute that scene. And it was just like the most like magical like moment that could happen on a panel like that. I was just like, we're like over by the stairs, like crying, just listening to her tell this like beautiful story because she's so emotional about it. And yeah, that is a moment I will remember for sure.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And kudos to you for being able to tell an entire story about this without like even giving away spoilers. But like I think about my favorite details from the show, and I don't think I could like delve into them the way that you just did. Because they're too spoilery, but there's so many really, really beautiful this show, you get to know the characters and the relationships between them so well that as the series goes on, the payoff even of small moments is massive. So it's really beautiful to hear how it all really came together for you there. Which brings me to, let's talk a little bit more about, some of the details of the show. So let's talk about favorite main characters. So I said we had, let's say, 5 main characters. We've got Jo, who's basically the visionary of the team. We've got Cameron. She's a very talented young programmer. We've got Gordon, who is an engineer. We've got Donna, who's the hardware expert, the project manager, the mom sometimes. We've got Boz, who's the salesman, Texas good old boy salesman. Of those, who would you say you were most drawn to? I kind of have a sense of where you like. I'm narrowing down where you might take this, but if you had to pick one, who would you say is your favorite of those?
You go. I just talked a bunch.
I thought about this for a while, just in thinking about, I mean, how much you love all the characters, and the perfect mesh of them is what makes the show so great. But I think that it's Donna and her journey. And there's times where she's quite unlikable in this show. Things she does, you're like, oh, that was just, why did you do that? And the choices she makes. But when you go on the whole journey with her, you understand and you see her so much. I'm trying, without being spoilery, like you see her so much come into her own and take her power, sometimes make bad decisions with that, but then redirect and make amends and do great things with it. And I just think her figuring out who she is as she, I mean, she's brilliant from the beginning, but is overlooked a lot by everyone else because she's a woman in the 80s in the tech industry. And so she's definitely pushed aside a bit, but also comes in and is needed to save the day a few times because people know that she is there, but she doesn't get any of the accolades for it. And so by the end, when you see her really own that power and stand up and bring women together, there's just, with making a lot of mistakes along the way, but I just love her so much and that journey and who she is and who she becomes.
Yeah, I think when I first started watching, I think I was definitely the most like drawn to Cameron as like an individual, just because she is like the rock and roll artist of the whole thing. You know, it's like Joe is like a big picture thinker, but Cameron is the one that does it, you know, that like makes it real. And there is something like so cool about that to me. And but I think like rewatching it, you know, years later, I still like love Cameron, but she feels so young now, like like, you know, 8, 9, 10 years out. Like it just feels like you kind of realize that like Donna is the adult in the room, and like that feels more relatable at this, you know, particular moment. But I love them both, and I think Boz is just like
Just Boss.
the one I feel the warmest toward. Like he feels like Texas, he feels like family, he feels like there's just something like so comforting about Boz, like as a character.
And also someone, when you first meet Boz, your first impression of who he is and who he's going to be is, I feel like, very specific. And then quickly, because I had like in season 1, by the end of season 1, you're like, oh, you're everything that Jen just said. And you're like, oh, I love you deeply. And then watching him go on the journey he goes on is also so good.
What a beautiful journey he goes on. And you know, Jennifer, to your point, you know, Cam, it's easy to forget. I think it's easy to forget on a first viewing how young Cam actually is in the show.
Yeah.
So it's fun to see that the show meets you where you are as you've come back to it in later years from that first viewing, because she's probably at least 10 years, maybe more than 10 years younger than the rest of the main characters. But people, I think, forget that when they analyze that character, because, you know, she's thrown, you know, she is very much their peer and she's thrown into the same situations as they are. So it's fun that like that's sort of giving you a new lens to look through on each viewing that you've had. This show had, other than those 5, so many incredible actors came in to play various roles, whether they were recurring, whether they were guest stars, you know, supporting, you know, however many episodes they were in. This show had a lot of pretty incredible characters come in. Of everybody who's not those main 5, who sticks out to you as a favorite?
I mean, Annabeth Gish as Diane is like incredible. Like she just, it is so hard, I think, to come in and like match the energy of those 5 because they're so even by that point in the series, like those actors like are those people. And so I think it's just like incredible what she is able to do. And as a new like element in that mixture. And I also really like am very fond of Haley and Joni. I love a misunderstood teenager so much. And I just think, especially in the later seasons, like Catherine Newton is just amazing.
Yes, I agree with all of that. Also, just this moment I was thinking, when Anna Klumsky comes in, and I know it's not a huge or a long, like a huge arc that she's on, but her character and her balance to the partnership that she plays was really strong in a way that when someone else comes in that role, being very vague from where she comes in, but when that role, it's easy to not want to like that person and to just want it not to succeed, but you're like, oh, I really like you, and the balance that you are now throwing into the dynamic of this group.
It's so funny because yeah, you probably shouldn't like if you just looked at it on paper, like you probably shouldn't. I liked her from the second she was on screen. So it's so funny how she just had like that, and it just has that energy that like overrides it all. And Diane is my favorite character in all of television, so I'm so glad she got a nod here. I mean, what a good job you both just did of answering that without spoilers. That was such a minefield. So this show is full of 80s and 90s nostalgia. Again, it ran, the time period in the show is 1983 to 1994. So we're going to get a lot of 80s and 90s nostalgia, but it's not always the stereotypical view of it that you might see. Sometimes they go for things that are a little more under the surface from that time period. What jumps out to you as some of your favorite nostalgic elements from this show?
I was thinking about this question, and I feel like for me, this may be a weird answer, but in season 1, there is an episode with a Hurricane Alicia, which growing up in Houston, Texas, like in the 90s, like heard many tales of Hurricane Alicia, and experienced plenty of hurricanes myself. And so I think there is just something, I think actually for me that's the episode where like I really like fell in love with the show, because it felt like a Texas that I knew. And they are so good at, there's almost like two parts to the episode where like you're getting this like this sort of like dangerous, exciting side of what a storm like that can be, and then you're also getting this like nightmarish side from another character's point of view. And then you're also getting these, quiet conversational moments, which is like, I can't even count how many times I've been like, growing up, we were kind of like locked down in our house, like with the lights off, and just kind of having conversations and like waiting for it to pass. And like that feeling is so visceral, and like really like took me back to like Texas in that moment. And I think that's something that the show does really well. And sort of like, that's not what I would think of first in like a nostalgic sense, is like a hurricane, but that is like one of my strongest memories of it sort of catapulting me back in that way, and being like, oh, this show like really understands what it is and where it is.
And I think for me, it leans in because it is the birth of the internet. I mean, the show talks about it in the different areas and the different people that are starting to put things out there. And when the chat rooms first start, and it really is people meeting on the internet for the first time and finding connection on the internet. And it feels like back to when it was a lot simpler. There were a lot less places to go, but you could go on and really make friends and have these long conversations. And is it Cam and Tom that have the long, so a scene where Cam and this character Tom are talking about feelings, talking about themselves, but they're doing it via chat, so they're not doing it face to face. And that feeling of when you would sign on to AOL, Instant Messenger or whatnot, and have these long emotional conversations. And it was the first time you could feel that you could reveal parts of yourself through text online without like being a full version of yourself and having that barrier where I'm not looking at your face, we're not talking on the phone. And those first, like, especially little teen angsty conversations that you would have with people online, friends or strangers that became friends. And those just like long hours of conversations. There was something at the time a lot more pure and simple about it, where now it's like you get on the internet and there's 1,000 things taking your attention, as opposed to just like these singular conversations that you could have for hours with people. And I deeply loved that first connection that when people got on the internet could actually make with people in different places.
These are the best answers. This show really did a wonderful job of capturing the feeling of being in those conversations, like you said. And there's a character actually when we're getting into like the internet portion. There's a character who's describing the feeling of being on the World Wide Web as like you can be who you really are on the internet in a way you can't be in real life. And I don't know if we would answer that the same way now. I don't know if we would say the same thing now, but it does feel really true to that time. So it's just so beautifully captured.
It is interesting because I feel like there was a time when it first started where you could be your most authentic self there. And now it feels like you are becoming a persona of what you want the world to see when you put yourself on the internet. And it is a very different place to be.
Nobody
Yeah.
had like a brand,
Yeah.
in the 90s. Like that's not, you were just going on to find people with common interests. And now it's like, you have to like make yourself into this thing. So
Yeah, such cool answers to that question. What is something that you learned about this show in the process of bringing it to your stage at the ATX TV Festival this year? What's some new information that came from that for you?
I'm trying to think. I feel like weirdly I didn't know sort of how the show had come together. And like there was a cool moment of them sort of talking on the panel about how like in taking the show out, they were trying to find the right place for it. And they pitched a lot of different places and met a lot of different, networks. And then they sort of found Melissa and Mark. And it was like a very like two people having a conversation with two people versus like pitching to this like entity. And I think that really speaks to like the spirit of the show. And like, I think you feel that like very personal, like through line all the way through it. Which makes a lot of sense knowing that now that that's sort of like how it came together and the way that they all found each other and like opted into this thing. Yeah. Trying to think.
Yeah, I feel like I'm about the same. Like those first creative conversations were really cool to hear them speak about. And just knowing, because the two Chris's were very young showrunners, hadn't done really anything before this. So this was their first show and how much they had to learn in the process. But Mark Johnson and Melissa Bernstein are such incredible producers in their own right, but then also mentor-like producers where they really love shepherding new talent and bringing up talent. And that's what they were able to do with this. And that you even have Melissa Bernstein, who came to the festival pretty much from shooting House of the Dragon. And so she's now doing these like huge HBO blockbuster shows. Obviously thousands of things in between, but that she has such deep love for this small, quiet show. And that's just really fun and lovely to see too, that the people that make it, yeah, they're making these like huge shows that everyone watches, but like their heart and soul is also in these like beautiful pieces that more people do need to watch, which is what you're doing, but that they such love for it.
It's beautifully said. And I think you're right. I mean, I think it doesn't really strike you until you hear the story that like Chris and Chris, the creators of this show, they were a very new partnership. And this was like the first project, the first script they shopped around. And I don't think that they intended, there was like a pitch to get a writing job on another show. And this show was picked up. So I think it like, I don't know if people truly realize like how new and how young this team was. But when I look at it and I think about the people that I've interviewed for this podcast, like I interviewed one, Jose Campanella, who directed 5 episodes of the show. He directed the pilot. He's an Academy Award winning director. And that's like who they got right out of the gate. They like put all these really incredible people around them. And I think they didn't have an ego about it. And it's really comes across, and including in what they said in your panel. You really get that feeling from them. What should we look forward to in season 14? You probably can't spoil anything for us, but this will probably drop a while from now. So what should we know?
So much more TV. I would say, yeah, like that is, I mean, I know it sounds so dumb as we are a television festival, but it is, we always have nostalgia, the reunions. We always are highlighting things that are currently happening. And then we're always looking ahead, as you said, to the future and premieres of new things. So it really is across the board great television. And then one of our favorite things to do that we're diving into now is figuring out what are also the conversations we want to have. We're obviously now almost exactly a year coming out of a double strike. This past summer was, I feel like, a lot of conversations on not necessarily the repercussions of the strike, but on, okay, we're through it. And like, there's a lot of trauma coming out of it. And we're still trying to figure out how to get things back on track and when our shows are happening. And there's a lot of unsettled feelings. Like the festival was so magical and special this year as people were just excited to be able to celebrate their shows again, but there's still a big feeling of people just being unsettled, not knowing what the future holds. And I feel like still uncertain, but once we get to May, June of 2025, that at least people will kind of have a better idea of how things have settled and what's to come. And we really love having those conversations with the thought leaders that have become a huge part of our family, from the showrunners to the executives to, the below the line creatives and cast, like the people that are really at the forefront of what's happening is really bringing those people together to talk about what they're excited about. And also, I mean, it's so great because it's an honest place, like what their fears are too.
Yeah.
And then a lot of also fun trivia, karaoke, game nights, just talking about television. Yeah. Jen, you're the director of programming. Anything else you want to
add? Yes, all of that. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're always gonna, I will say we have a reunion that we're working on that there will probably be some crossover with Halt fans as fans of like prestige, beautifully written TV. So that's something to look forward to. But yeah, we're always gonna make, having these shows like Halt that we care about and that are meaningful to us and the TV community. I mean, I think the thing that like I sort of knew would happen, but was surprised to the degree that it happened is like when we announced Halt last year is like immediate response from like even like critics that covered it 10 years ago. We're just like, oh my gosh, like I love this show so much. Tell me when it's happening, where it's happening. Like it just, I think there is such a strong like enduring community around shows like this, where you can tell that the people who made it really care about it. And so it's always like, I think the most fun for us to get to look back at those shows and really kind of give them the moment that they deserve, 5, 10, 15 years later. So
Oh, this is so great. And I'll also plug your festival from a different angle. I attended for the first time this season to cover Halt and Catch Fire and to get some interviews as press. And I watch a lot of TV, but I've never had the experience of being able to see TV on a big screen in a room with people who love TV, like who aren't just they may be casually watching a show or discovering a show for the first time, but they don't casually watch TV. They're like this group of people who really likes to like and appreciate good work on screen. And to be able to see television in a setting like that was completely novel for me. So you get to do it every year. So everybody should check out whatever's coming up in season 14. This, in case there's anything else that you want to plug, what are you up to now or where can we find you? However you want to answer that question. You might have already plugged the things that you want to plug, but let us know what's coming up for you and where we can find you.
ATXfestival.com and ATXTV.com. They both connect to each other, so you can go to either one. The festival website is very focused on the big event, season 14 coming up at the end of May. And then ATXTV.com is very much focused on kind of the year-round programming that we're doing and our panel releases, our YouTube channel. So you can definitely go, you can go watch our Halt and Catch Fire panel and all like other examples of what we've done so you can get an idea for what next year's festival will look like. But also we have a weekend watch email that comes out every Friday about what we're watching. It's old and new things, and it's our team and special guests talking about, there's so much television out there and so much of it is so great, but it's hard. You sit down in front of your TV and you're like, what do I want to watch? And you don't know where to start because there's so much to go through. So it at least narrows it down to a handful of things that you should try. That's a spectrum depending on your mood. And our newsletter, when you go to the website to sign up for our newsletter, it does have events that we're doing here in Austin. We have a membership program where we meet multiple times a month via Zoom with people from all over the US, all over the world, our avid attendees, where we do things like TV watch clubs, where we watch the pilot of a new show and then discuss it like a book club, but it's TV, so it's better. And we have on special guests all year round, showrunners, casting directors, cast members, all across the board. So it's a way for us to gather throughout the year so that when we come together at the actual festival, it hasn't been a year since we've talked. We get to celebrate. There's too much TV happening all year long, so we figure out ways to celebrate it throughout the year.
Yeah, and we are deep into planning for season 14 already. So we will have news coming out very soon, or it may already be out depending on when this drops. But yeah, we'll have a couple of announcements before the end of this year, and we're excited to tell people what we're working on for next year. So
amazing. Yeah. Thank you both for taking some time and taking a second trip down memory lane this year about this show. It was such a blast to talk with you.
Any chance to talk about Halt.
I know. Now I'm like, okay, time for the rewatch to start. Yeah, that's what we're going to start doing right now is the rewatch.
Perfect.
Thanks for having us.
And hey, to everybody who's watching this, follow Emily's lead. Go out there and watch Halt and Catch Fire. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.